One night, a weary traveler found himself lost in one of South Carolina's dense forests. Hungry and in need of shelter, he caught the faint aroma of cooking in the air and spotted a quaint cabin nestled among the trees. He watched with relief as the door opened, revealing a lovely young woman. Her face was kind, and seeing he was in need, she offered him a deal. A hearty meal and a good night's sleep in exchange for some work around the house. Feeling the emptiness in his stomach, the man quickly agreed. The feast was tasty and warm, and he'd hardly known a better night's sleep. So comfortable was he that the next day, when it came time to continue his journey, he decided to stay on as a handyman. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and eventually the two entered into a comfortable common-law marriage. The arrangement was easy and agreeable for the pair. That is, until one night, when the man awoke to discover his wife had vanished from their bed. Perhaps she's not well, he thought, before closing his eyes once again. The next morning he inquired as to her health. Had she been ill the night before? "What do you mean?" she bristled. "I slept like a baby." But the man was clever, and he sensed something was amiss. He decided to stay awake that night to see if the strange behavior continued. As he lay still, he heard his wife rise and whisper something strange. "Turn and spin. Come off, skin." With his eyes still closed, the man heard a peculiar shuffling sound. He waited, heart pounding, as the woman scurried out of the cabin. When he was certain she had left, he opened his eyes to find his worst fears confirmed. There, under the bed, lay the empty skin of his wife, peeled away like a corn husk. This woman wasn't a human, but a Boo Hag, an undead creature of the darkest magic. He'd heard tell of these creatures, and he knew they could only survive by stealing energy from the living. He also knew that if he wanted to get rid of it, he'd have to work quickly. He gathered up the Boo Hag's skin and moved to the kitchen, where he pulled the salt and spicy red pepper off the shelf. With careful hands, the man sprinkled the salt and red pepper over the empty skin, making sure it covered every nook and fold. Then he returned the flesh to where he'd found it and crawled beneath the covers, feigning sleep until the creature came back. As dawn approached, he heard the door creak open. "I done had me some foam. My work's done, so skin, let me in." He heard the Boo Hag chuckle. There was silence for a moment as the Boo Hag stepped back into its fleshly disguise. "Skin, let me in." To the creature's surprise, it seemed that this time the skin wouldn't fit. The salt had shrunken and hardened it into a leathery mess. The man listened quietly as the being howled, "Skinny! Skinny! Don't you know me?" The red pepper burned her flesh. This skin was now a torturous prison. Finally, there was a long, painful groan, followed by a heavy thump. The Boo Hag was dead. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, the man turned to see the remnants of his wife. Nothing but salt and tiny bits of dried, shredded leather. He wasted no time in gathering his belongings and leaving that haunted cabin without so much as a glance behind him. It was a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. Not everything is as it seems.
Welcome back, guys, to our final episode of the season.
This is it.
And what a creepy, freaking story to round the season out. The Boo Hag, no thank you.
Yeah. It's technically an urban legend, which urban legends, to me, that's American folklore. We've taken all of these things, melted them together, and now we have our own kind of culture, contrary to what people say. Because I had to look up the actual definition of what an urban legend is supposed to be, and it's either going to scare you or it's going to teach you something. So that made me think of fairy tales, right? Because fairy tales started out super dark, and they were always to warn, typically women, to like not do something or not behave a certain way. And I think our urban legends were like that. This connects so much with Charleston, though. Anyway, just to bring it full circle, which is why I love that we're doing it as our finale, because there's so much of this Charleston talk that we've had in these past episodes that we can't confirm, right? So this is all really urban legend, that we're basing this on. And my experience being down in Charleston, I know we've heard about Dale's ghost tour. Mine was a little more traumatic, and it stemmed from learning about the Gullah Geechee culture. When you picture Charleston, and I'm sure we've posted maps and things like that to kind of give you the visual, but the Gullah people spread from about Cape Fear, North Carolina, which was very close to the original Charlestown, all the way down to Jacksonville, Florida. And it was because we had that slave trade going on, right? So this Gullah culture kind of came from and was established by these enslaved Africans who typically came from Central or West Africa. And they developed this Creole culture, which preserved their linguistics, their overarching culture in general, their heritage. And I think that's an amazing thing to do. They kind of brought in Christianity and Islam and then created their own, style of worship. Let's call it that, style of worship. This culture, I automatically think like voodoo, which again makes me think of New Orleans, which is why I always connect the two. But they did believe in witchcraft. They did have what was called like root doctors and witch doctors, voodoo priests. There was an extremely famous one named Minerva, who
McGonagall?
No,
Minerva.
She was apparently a character in the movie The Garden of Good and Evil.
Ooh.
Which that's an oldie but a goodie.
Great movie.
And I'm gonna have to revisit that one. Yeah. But it's just so funny to me because when I read about it, how they called it voodoo, juju, voodoo, hoodoo. I think the labyrinth. I'm like, hoodoo, you do.
I love the labyrinth.
I know. I had to throw the reference out there, but they had their own superstitions, their own kind of way of warning people of things. So I've read that they used to put newspapers on their wall or a piece of newspaper in their shoe to ward off bad spirits because they would spend more time reading it and lose interest and then disappearing.
That's wild.
And I'm just like, okay, so they do their amulets, they do their mojo thing, but really they have this idea that people have both a spirit and a soul.
Okay.
And I thought that was very unique, because I don't feel like I remember that being a thing in Christianity. I don't know about Islam culture.
And we kind of touched on this in the last episode, even though we were joking about it. The Outlander series, which all of us are very into. There are portions of the series when they are in the Carolinas.
Yes.
And they have what I'm assuming they based off the Gullah people, and they stumble upon
Gullah Geechee.
I'm saying Gullah. Darn. Please forgive me, my ignorance. But they stumble upon these ceremonies that they're having on the beach. And at first it seems like, oh, this is going to be scary. But then, they kind of give it a chance and it's like, wow, this is like,
it's really just a way
incredible
to
and
talk.
powerful. And and
speak to the spirits.
It's like one of those weird things because that's so pop culture, right? But very based on historical situations. But now I feel like hearing your story, I kind of have a visual.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love it. And I mean, just reading a little bit of their, like the foundation of their culture, I guess. So they believe they have both a spirit and a soul, right? Your soul would ascend to heaven or go down to hell, right? Depending on how your life was.
With our girl Lavinia?
Yes, definitely. But your spirit stays behind to help guide your descendants as part of this ancestor worship that kind of stems from hoodoo. And I was like, that's incredible. but they definitely believe in evil spirits. And the more I learned about this, the more I realized we probably saw things in Charleston and we didn't even realize what we were looking at.
Yeah.
So
fair.
That leads us to one of their, it's so hard for me to talk about, one of their more terrifying stories or urban legends, which is called the Boo Hag.
Which everyone kind of heard a little bit about in the story to start the episode.
Yeah. Yes. So hopefully you've got a nice little image in your head, but I'm going to help you visualize this. There are a few different variations to their Boo Hags. Like there's this traditional one. There's one that's called Mrs. Hag, which I personally love. But essentially, it could be this evil spirit. It could be almost in the realm of a female vampire-like creature. People have said it even looks witch-like or demon-like. But essentially, all of them peel off their skin.
Okay.
And this is always at night, right? They peel off their skin and they're basically looking for like a human skin bag to kind of jump into. But where they vary from vampires, right? They don't suck out your blood. They're actually sucking out your spirit. So they, like, a warning sign has been if you wake up and you feel exhausted, but you've gotten a full night's sleep, that they say you could have been visited by a Boo Hag at night.
So they don't kill you, they just take your soul?
Apparently. I mean, I guess they could kill you.
Right.
Yeah. I apparently escaped within an inch of my life and I didn't even realize it. But when they're talking about this witchcraft and this evil magic, right, it's to cause this havoc, like amongst innocent people. And they connect the Boo Hag with sleep paralysis. Right.
Which I have horrendously.
And like you said in the last episode, the explain it away.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. What an easy way. Like we could blame science on that. But there's this, like I said, I'm going to give you the picture. It's called The Nightmare. And I love that. And it's a creepy freaking picture, but I kind of want it. But it's the one that I had showed you before. That it's this little demon looking thing sitting on top of a white woman who's kind of like sprawled out in white, sleeping. And it was originally painted in 1781 by this Swiss artist named Henry Fuseli. And they called it an incubus that's on top of her.
Yes. And I actually knew this story because I'm a huge Incubus fan, the band.
Yes.
Which they talk about how when they found the name for the band, it was based off the spirit.
Yeah.
That's why.
Which I don't like because I was like, does that mean you're evil?
No, they're so good.
Yeah.
Have you seen how beautiful Brendan Boyd is? Come on.
Yes. I used
Gorgeous.
to have like a full wall poster of them in my college dorm.
Same.
But I digress. So anyway, but that picture really kind of helps put this into perspective because the Boo Hag is said to come to you at night and, quote unquote, ride you, like sit on you and suck the air from your lungs as you sleep. So,
okay.
If you're lucky, you wake up exhausted, they say.
Right.
But if you wake up during the encounter, that's when it could possibly kill you. I'm going to dispute that point as I am here to tell the tale.
You are alive.
Okay, so I've mentioned
I'm so excited for this.
Yeah, I am too.
I am not, okay? I get so creeped out that, like, it's going to happen again. Every time I tell, like,
No, we're representing them well. The Boo Hag, I just want you to know.
We're talking about them, so we're, yeah, right.
Yeah, and I do just want to say something that I had mentioned to Deena when she showed me the picture of this skinless creature. I'm like, why are they all veiny? Why do they look like something from the body museum? And she was like, well, because they have no skin. Welp. I was like, what does that smell like?
So actually, I did find that because that could be a warning sign that one is close to you. So, and that reminds me of your jail or dungeon story, right? Because the air would become very hot and very damp. I was like, I don't really believe that. This is Charleston, South Carolina. It's humid. We all know it,
Yeah.
But it says the air smells like something is rotting.
Oh, okay.
So there we go. When your veins are outside of your body and you have no skin, you smell like you're rotting, apparently.
That adds up. Adds up. Okay.
So my ghost tour was at night, obviously. My tour, I should say, was at night. And I don't really remember a lot of the places. This was definitely a few years ago. I do remember that we passed a haunted ATM at one point.
Does it give you free money? Because I would love
wish.
to visit it.
Yes, I wish. But no, the things that you send the thing up to.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Like the thing would just go off. And it actually did go off a couple times as we were walking by. And I was like, that could be staged, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, our tour ends at the gates to the Unitarian Church, where I hear the story for the first time that this could be where Annabelle Lee was buried, right? Yeah. And she could have stopped there. That was the end of the tour, okay? But no, Deena has to ask questions and find out more information. So then she decides to tell her own experience about the Boo Hag, which is the first time I've ever even heard of this. I thought she was completely joking because the way you get rid of them is a little bit ridiculous. It's very outlandish. So if you need a cure to get rid of a Boo Hag.
We probably will after this episode, so please tell us.
Yeah. Right. She told me that one of the ways to get rid of them was with a straw broom or anything with bristles because they get distracted by counting. They have to count all the bristles and then eventually the sun comes up and then they're destroyed. Sounds ridiculous, right?
So they can only come out at night.
Correct.
And they have a little touch of OCD, maybe a little ADHD like me. They got a spicy brain, so they just have to count things.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm just like, okay, that seems ridiculous. Like, that's obviously made up, right? I'm totally skeptical at this point. And I go home, which was not home. It was an Airbnb. You know, my friends and I were there for the weekend. And I couldn't sleep. Like, I just was like, no. I'm like, something is popping out. Like, I can't. And my friend who I was sharing the room with had already driven back home. So I was by myself and I was terrified. And I'm only saying that because I got very little sleep. Okay. The next day we had about a 3-hour drive back home and I wind up falling asleep on my couch. All right. Makes perfect sense, right? Because I was exhausted. I'd been up all night. Well, while I'm sleeping, I wake up, but I cannot open my eyes. Okay. And I knew I was awake. I 100% knew I was awake. And I tried to move. I thought maybe I could like rub my eyes. Nope. Couldn't move whatsoever. Now I get it. Sleep paralysis. I have never had sleep paralysis in my entire life. I'm like struggling and like fighting to open up my eyelids when all of a sudden I feel a hand on my chest push me into the couch, like push me down into the couch. And I will never forget the feeling because I was like, what on earth is touching me right now? And so I started like fighting to wake up, wake myself up, thinking that I must have still been in a dream, to move my arms, to move my legs, to get up off of this couch. And eventually it worked. And I flew off the couch, hysterically crying. Like, what the hell was that? Now, they usually say dogs can sense evil, and I have a dog. And she literally was just like chilling on her bed the entire time, watching whatever
Which
was
is
happening.
wild because Coco barks. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the Boo Hag gave her a treat.
Possibly. So I am skeptical that way, but I am telling you, I know what I felt. And I did not see anything, but it is you know what that feeling feels like when there is a hand on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thankfully, one of the girls that I went on a trip with is married to a minister. So I call her hysterically. I'm like, you both need to get over here right now. Okay. While I'm waiting for them to come over to now exercise my house because I'm convinced it's there, I call the tour company.
Stop. Hold on. Just trying to have a visual here. You're the tour company. Here's a hysterical girl. What time of the day is this?
It's middle of the afternoon.
That is incredible.
I was just glad somebody picked up. So
And
I am sobbing. Like, I don't remember what my tour guide's name was, but she told us the story, and I swear to God, it's happening, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now. And she goes, well, I guess one followed you home.
I'm sorry.
I was like, that is not helpful.
Yeah.
And so she was just like, well, Google it, essentially. You know, like what you could do to get rid of it. So anyway, that was not helpful. My friend comes over with her husband, and he goes from room to room, and he blesses the rooms and stuff. Yeah, I didn't sleep for 2 days. When I say I grabbed every hairbrush, dustpan,
Any
broom,
form of brush, broom, sweeping.
18 toothbrushes on the floor.
Yeah.
Just surround your whole bed.
My bed, my couch.
Yeah.
Coco's toothbrush.
Anything that I could put anything with bristles underneath, it was there. And I will say nothing ever did wind up happening again, but it was the most terrifying experience. And as somebody who enjoys the spooky, creepy things, I've always wanted to have an encounter. You know, like everything you were saying last week, I keep picturing these dungeons. I'm like, oh, I want to go.
Yeah.
But then I think back to that moment and I was like, that was not fun.
Yeah.
That was not fun.
Understandably so.
Yeah. Okay. Now,
Okay. Got to cool down a little bit.
okay. So this kind of leads us into, like, first of all,
I could tell you, ways to prevent it too.
well, go ahead.
I mean, because
We've passed that stage, but yeah, go ahead.
But I mean, isn't that the point of like the urban legend, right? You hear this story, it's terrifying. You try and figure out a way to avoid that from happening to you.
Right.
Thus enter the haint paint.
Oh, yes. I
I was
hear
like,
about this.
we can't skip that. So haint, Haint, is a specific color of blue, like an indigo blue that people...
Indigo.
Exactly. You
Okay.
had said that last time, that they saw that color, right? In the pit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So apparently, it's to ward off evil spirits.
Interesting.
So there are porches and different things throughout Charleston that are painted this color blue to keep the evil spirits away.
I think it was our second episode. Didn't we talk about one of the buildings? The second half of the building was painted in the haint paint because they were like, it's painted in the blue color, and it was just the top half.
Yeah.
And that was the most haunted
Of course it was.
portion.
Of course it was.
Yes, that would make sense.
But I guess I didn't see this personally, but it's beautiful to look at. They've also created what's called bottle trees. So they put these actual like glass bottles that are dyed blue all over different trees, sticks, branches, things like that. And it looks really cute in a garden. But again, it's supposed to keep these ghosts and evil spirits away.
That specific color. That's wild.
I think that when I go back to Charleston, everything in my suitcase will be that color.
Yep. And maybe like wear a necklace.
Wait, hold
with
on.
that.
Deena's going to paint herself like the Blue Man Group. The story of the Gullah people, when you were telling it, like something I think is so beautiful about that, and this is maybe a tough topic, but my grandmother, who's passed, she practiced Santeria, which is very similar to this, and truly believed in evil spirits and had her own ways of warding them off. And there is something to be said in the beauty of it, because there is like, just in the research we've done for this and the stuff I've read, they really were robbed of their culture during slave trade. And they did such a wonderful job of trying to preserve it. Yeah. And it has bled, like we always do. Our society has stolen things from their culture to try and make it our own.
Yeah.
But stories like this about the Boo Hag, like I love learning these things because, we just kind of whitewash these stories in history.
Yeah.
And these stories are not like they brought these stories with them, and their cultures are thousands and thousands and thousands of years older than ours. And I kind of like trust them way more than us.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Nice.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah.
Their stuff is rooted in actual experience, where ours is rooted in 15 different layered stories.
Yeah. And that's why I'm also glad I didn't read all of this before, like knowing that, because they say if you fight, the Boo Hag might steal your skin. Very similar to our story that we heard. Sure. And I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's something to it that, it's a female hag, women, witches. Kind of, I do think there might be more to it than that. I haven't dug that deep, but I think it's I don't know what it's supposed to warn you of.
Well, I don't know. I think there's like something to be said. I know you're going to kind of jump into some more of like the stories from that culture and kind of stemming from that. But there's something to be said about these stories have stood the test of time. They're still telling these stories.
Yes.
Because these experiences are still happening.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell your other creepy story?
I mean, I can jump right in.
Okay. This one's kind of my favorite.
In 1867 in Charleston, the owner of a new apothecary found himself on the wrong end of a rioting group of over 500 people. So the apothecary was opened up in a building called the John Lining House, which was a historic home built in the late 1700s. And
is it one of the oldest buildings?
Probably was.
Is it the most haunted building?
It might be. It doesn't actually, what's funny is this one doesn't say
it
that.
Does not say
so, I mean, maybe they just didn't have enough people talking about it. But this building originally was owned by a doctor named John Lining, and he gave the house to his wife as a gift. And so obviously time has gone by. The story that I'm going to talk about is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Trott, and he opens up an apothecary in this building. And so, like, the original owners would rent out this space for a doctor to come in and run it as an apothecary. This doctor opened up his shop in 1867, so quite some time after it was built originally.
For sure.
And he wasn't doing well. People weren't coming. And he was like, what's going on? I don't have a single customer. Like, I don't understand why no one's coming. Finally, a customer comes in. He asks them, like, hey, why is no one coming to my apothecary? Because obviously he's probably one of the only ones in the area. The customer's like, oh, yeah, well, all of the locals went to a gullah root doctor.
Mm-hmm.
They get all of their medicines and everything from her. So they don't need to come to the apothecary. And he's like, what the heck? Why are they going to a gullah doctor?
It actually probably was a man. The root doctors are typically men.
Female.
Really?
Uh-huh. So Dr. Trott decided he needed to do something to really bring in the crowd, because obviously he wasn't going to get any customers if there wasn't a reason for them to come. And he felt like he needed something that was spectacular to get them to come in. So he immediately thought of, also Dr. Trott is originally from New York. So if you can assume where this might be going, he immediately thought of the infamous P.T. Barnum, the creator,
greatest showman,
the
greatest showman,
modern circus, and the Fiji mermaid. The Fiji mermaid, though, however, if you don't know the story, people were extremely disgusted by this mermaid because the mermaid was the ugliest thing people had ever seen, to the point of riots outside of the museum, because the mermaid was a shriveled body of a monkey sewn onto a fish's body.
That is so disgusting.
Not Ariel.
Yeah.
Not the pretty mermaid. I mean, at that time, there was no Ariel yet.
Really not John Cena in the Barbie movie?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
That would be terrible. But, of course, Dr. Trott's like, that's okay. We're gonna close the shop down. I'm going to make my own mermaid. So he closes his little shop
down. Seems like
down.
a very bad idea.
I was literally just thinking that.
But here's the thing, is he posted a sign that said free magic show with a countdown that read 4 days. So, of course, curiosity began to build in the community because people were like, what's a magic show? Like, that's so exciting. So he gets really excited over this, and he goes around collecting glass aquariums and filled them with sand, seashells, seahorses, plants, and other fishes and creatures. He spent days catching and collecting all these plants and animals to fill his tanks, and people were going to be very impressed. And clearly aquariums in a coastal town is not a new thing.
Yeah, that's
right,
a pigeon in New York.
Exactly. But he saved the best thing for last. He ushered people in to check out a tank that was covered in a black cloth. It was dimly lit, and he would only pull back the cover for a few seconds, and people would see a tank filled with a large fish and murky water. But someone called out that he could see the mermaid. So people were very excited. However, there was a tail hidden amongst the plants, and people scrambled closer for a better look. However, Trott threw the cover back over the tank and told them you had to, other people were waiting, so you had enough time, you have to go. And people spent money to see the mermaid. In his mind, it was a harmless gimmick. It was getting people in the door. He didn't think anything of it. However, the root doctor heard people explaining that they had seen a mermaid in a tank, and she went to see.
She called bullshit.
She went to see said mermaid. When she went to see the mermaid, Dr. Trott was like, oh man, something terrible happened. The mermaid's gone. I don't know. She's not in the tank anymore, and I don't know what happened. Well, the root doctor was like, A few days later, in June of 1867, a terrible storm came to Charleston, and it rained for 4 days and 4 nights, flooding the city, the homes, the people. It was the worst rain in 50 years.
The mecca of all of Mother Nature.
Yeah.
Again.
And it was a Category 1 hurricane. The whole history of mermaids this is like a huge part of this story as well. So mermaids were nature spirits to the African slaves, and the belief from like their lives in Africa. And so an angry mermaid could cause shipwrecks, storms, and other watery disasters. They were afraid. So the community of people were afraid that this is what happened. So basically,
way to go, Trot.
Dr. Trot made up a story, but these people believed in mermaids so much so that when it started to pour, they were like, dude, it is this doctor's fault. We need to go tell him. So they march into his apothecary.
Did they bring pitchforks and torches?
No, not yet. So, so they
here
basically,
to kill the beast.
So they go in and they're like, they were like actually afraid because if they don't get this mermaid released back into the water, this rain will not stop. And so they go, they tell him, and he's just like, okay, but I don't have the mermaid. And they're like, well, we don't believe you.
How screwed is he? Like,
exactly. Well, even crazier. So they are like, yeah, you're lying. We saw the mermaid. So they go to the community leaders and speak to the city council. And Trot is served official paperwork stating that he has to release the mermaid or he'll be fined and also thrown in jail.
Oh, I hope it was the old Charleston jail.
Yeah, well, it probably would be. Of course, that doesn't happen because he doesn't have a mermaid because he made the whole thing up. So people are like, yeah, he's a jerk. We don't believe him. He's got this mermaid. And a little boy was killed going after his dog. And so because it was flooding so much, they were like, dude, someone just died now. So like, you have to give up this mermaid. A crowd of 500 gullahs come to protest the shop, and especially because the rain was not stopping. They demanded that the mermaid be returned to the ocean so that her watery wrath would end. And then to add insult to injury, the root doctor was like, also, the mermaid had left her only child in the beach's inlets, and its crying was causing the storm.
Oh,
so the mother needed to go back
to the baby
to save the baby so that she would stop crying. So the crowd totally fed up. Dr. Trot not releasing the mermaid. So they stormed the apothecary. They trash the whole place. And then Trot comes out and explains the entire thing was a hoax. Mm-hmm. He never had a mermaid to set free because she never existed. And that it was only fueled on speculation and all this other stuff. And they were like, yeah, no, you're lying. You're lying. Like, you have her.
Boy who cried wolf, man.
So they...
Another urban legend.
Well, and so he's like, you can search my whole space. Well, obviously they already trashed it. So they're like, yes, she's not in there. So they go in and they're like looking around the store. All of the glass tanks and stuff had been destroyed, and the plants on the inside of the aquariums were floating in the rainwater, and they floated out of the shop. A man claimed that he saw the mermaid swimming out away from the apothecary and back out to sea. And so they think that by the whole place being trashed, that the mermaid was trapped in one of those aquariums. And when that happened, she was able to swim back to sea and the rain stopped.
Minutes later,
the rain stopped and the storm finally ended. That is the story of the mermaid and the apothecary. But how stupid do you have to, come on.
I love it. I think
great.
Like
it's a
you
great
said,
story.
Boy Who Cries Wolf. My mom used to read that to me because it teaches you not to lie.
Yes.
And ever since I read that story, because there was a wolf in it, and wolves always terrified me as a child, especially big black ones with big long claws.
Yes.
I don't feel like to this day I can lie because it's terrifying to me.
Well, that's definitely one of those stories that he got what he deserved.
Mm-hmm.
You took something from their culture that's so sacred to them.
True.
Yeah.
Tried to turn it into a money grabbing thing. Good for them.
Yeah.
You stole a giant piece of who they are in their culture, something that they were clinging to because it was robbed from them to make $1.
It was wild.
Because you were pissed that the root doctor is getting all of your business when the root doctor is probably doing this crap for free because they're doing it. That's their calling. That's what they do.
Exactly.
He had already, the root doctor, had already established their home there too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Was cheaper than the apothecary. And like you said, he came from New York, so that's not your area. Like, you got to build your clientele, bro.
Exactly. You can't steal other people's.
I would never go up against a root doctor. I just think you're like asking for it.
And you deserve it.
But can we just talk about the fact that there was 500 people that went outside? Like, I'm assuming this is not a massive building, right? Can you imagine 500 people on those streets in Charleston that are itty bitty just to get this mermaid released?
Because it's so important to them to make sure that something that they believe in so heartedly from their culture is released where it should be. Like, you're not going to contain this thing. And I also love that they called it the mermaid riots.
Yes.
That was so funny. I saw it in my research.
Yeah, when they ran it in the newspapers, it was referred to the mermaid riots, though there was no actual
riot. They just wanted to free the freaking mermaid.
Yeah.
When I think about stories like that is another, it kind of brings us back to the Boo Hag story. And I mean, these are amazing urban legends.
Also, this is just like a little note from the story, which I just read and I need to read now. It says that the Gola people were going to do everything to save the captured mermaid because just 2 years earlier is when they had been freed from slavery. And so it would make sense that these people are like,
you're not going to enslave one of us again.
Of course we will do everything we possibly can to free this mermaid. That's beautiful.
That's beautiful. So I'm going to start with the Gray Man, which is, oddly enough, that's more of a story. The young man in this story, he came from Charleston. So this story is the ghost of a young man. He's traveling from Charleston to see his fiancée in 1822. On his way, he and his horse were caught in quicksand. It was right before Pawleys Island, so kind of after Charleston, right? Yeah. And he died. And so his spirits kind of haunted the shore ever since then. You know, it's looking for the girl he loved, which we know is a common theme in all these stories. But it became a printed book in Julian Stevenson Bullock's book, Waccamaw Plantations, in 1946, and then eventually in another book in 1956 of ghost stories. But it's gotten so much more national attention in the last 30 years because during Hurricane Hugo, there was a couple, Jim and Clara Moore. They were interviewed for one of all of our favorite shows, Unsolved Mysteries. They told their story about seeing a man on the beach, the same look that they describe in the stories. He waved to them and they waved back to him. Their house was the only house that was spared in the hurricane. Every house around them was decimated, but their house was completely spared, which is the legend of the Great Man. So essentially, if you see this man on the beach and he waves to you or nods to you and you get some interaction with him, your house will be saved in the hurricanes. Well, then in 2014, the Weather Channel, they devoted an entire episode to the story of the Gray Man.
Nice.
Because this isn't the first time it happens. So apparently people that have encountered him, and there was a bunch of people on the story. I watched the clip. They've either come ashore and to seen, oh, my home is completely fine. My belongings are fine, but everything around them is decimated. I love that some people say he looked like a young man on a horse, and sometimes he's on a horse, sometimes he's just walking on the shore. But again, folklore, this is, we're talking about urban legends. Eventually his, described as like a pirate. Maybe he's a pirate that came ashore and now he's protecting people because he was a nice pirate, whatever it may be. But I just like the idea of kind of going back to the Gullah legends. I like the idea of a guy that's just going to save your house from a hurricane if you're nice to him. Just be nice to me.
I just like that we're talking about a friendly ghost.
Me too. But I'm going to talk about now a sad story.
Oh, great.
So this is called The Story of the Ravenel Lights, which every single time I looked up urban legends in Charleston, this is for our area growing up, we had the legend of Sleepy Hollow, right? Everybody in New York, in the Hudson Valley where we grew up, you knew the story of the Headless Horseman and the legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
This is kind of their story. So every young kid hears this story. It's a spooky story you tell around the fire, and it's a story of the Ravenel Lights. So this is about 3 teenage boys. There's 2 kind of versions. One, they're ran over by a logging truck, and the other one, they're hit by a train. Both not great.
Wow.
At 12:30 in the morning, one of the kids that was walking along the tracks says, "I see lights. There's no train." They find these 3 bodies. In the other version of the story, the kids are walking up and down the street. They see 3 lights in the distance. they're hit by the logging truck and they're killed. But this is my favorite part. Do you guys ever have stories where that people would say like, oh, you go knock on this lady's door and the ghost would come to your house?
Sounds like Buckout Row.
Yes, this is exactly like that. So if you go to the Baptist church that the 3 boys are buried behind, because we don't know a lot about who these boys were, but if you go to the Baptist church doors, knock 3 times, and you say, we want to see the lights, and then you repeat the process 3 times, the lights of the logging truck will appear in front of you.
No, thank you.
This young teenage kid, he moves to Charleston. His first thing he wants to do, probably earning some street cred, grabs some of his new friends, and he goes to the church at 11:30 p.m., and he does the whole knocking thing. Nothing happens. And then they all go back to the road to wait for lights. Still nothing happens. There's already cars parked along the street and on the side road, so a couple of the kids were like leaning against the churchyard, like the cars outside the churchyard. So it's now an hour later. It's about 12:30. He and his friends see the lights coming down the road. They don't hear a car, but they see the lights coming down the road, and they're already leaning against cars. So like, okay, it's not any of these cars. There's no lights on, but they're looking. And so the one kid runs further down the road, looks behind. The lights are still coming towards them. There's no car, but they see these lights coming towards them. Obviously, they all freak out, and what they think is the car, the 2 headlights of the car, it comes to be one light, and then the one light zooms towards the kid that did the knocking on the door, and it like hits him in the chest. This is my favorite part. The kids run away. Oh. They're like, we don't know you.
Yeah.
We're out.
Bye.
We are out. He looked around him again. He almost wet his pants. I just love that they had to put that into that. And then he looks behind him. The 2 lights are there again. So they're continuing down the road. And then it looks like they're not 1 light, not 2 lights, but 3 lights. Almost like 3 motorcycles are getting ready to race back at him. And that's where they end that story. But one of the things that kept popping up when you type in the most ridiculous urban legends of Charleston, Bigfoot.
Oh, yeah.
Just so you know, guys, there has been 57 reported sightings of Bigfoot around Charleston, South Carolina.
That's wild.
And they started in 1964, and the most recent was in 2022.
Oh, wow.
And this is hilarious because I found a couple different stories, and one of my favorites is the first guy that saw it, it's just audio, and all you can hear is him describing what he saw. And he's like, it was a big, furry man, I think, or a foot. His foot was big, and then he ran behind a bush. And everyone's like, that must have been Bigfoot. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Like back then, you're just like so ready to accept it. It's like, absolutely.
I mean, that seems to be the trend. Everybody's pretty quick to jump on the train.
And that just really made me laugh. And it's the same thing as UFO sightings. They have a lot of UFO sightings in South Carolina.
Which is hilarious.
And there's actually this part, it's like 50 miles outside of Charleston, where people say that there's like a crop circle almost.
Oh, yes,
where absolutely nothing can grow, not even an earthworm, and they don't know why. It had nothing to do with the fire. It is a perfect circle that is just there, and they have no idea why it is there. But this is, hands down, without a doubt, my favorite ridiculous Charleston urban legend. It's the Swamp Man. And the Lizard Man.
Yeah.
Oh, the Swamp Man and the Lizard Man are the same person?
They're the same person, apparently.
Oh.
And as far as Charleston stories go, fairly recent. It's the wee dark hours in the morning of July 29th, or June 29th, I apologize.
The wee dark hours.
That's what it says. 1988. A teenage boy was driving home from work when he blew a tire along the edge of Scape or Swamp. First of all, what a great name for a swamp. He got out of the car to change the tire, and he heard a loud sound, something like someone running at him, and it was getting louder and louder. And then from the darkness, it says, it emerged. Blazing red eyes, green scaly skin, long black claws on 3 fingers, a staggering 7 feet tall. What else could it be but a lizard man? The boy jumped into his car for safety, but the lizard man attacked the car, ripping the mirror off and gouging the roof off the vehicle. 2 weeks later, the police were called to the scene of some vandalism. A car not too far from the same exact swamp had been attacked in the night. Fenders were ripped off, the antenna was bent, deep scratches along the body, and the chrome trim had been chewed off. What? And then, that same summer, more cars in the vicinity of Scape or Swamp were brutally attacked and chewed on. And then as more cars are being vandalized, they're starting to say that they're all seeing this enormous scaly green man lurking in the woods and swamps. The police kept getting called out, and the sheriff was starting to make, this is real, the sheriff was making plaster casts of the enormous 3-toed footprints left behind in the thick swamp mud. I just really hope this is somebody who worked on like a Hollywood movie and had the swamp man costume. Like, that's what I hope. They considered calling the FBI, decided against it. Then in the cooler days and nights, so the summer's come and gone, the lizard man, he receded back into his swamp. And then all of a sudden it got warmer again. And guess what? He's back. And over the decades, there's been sightings on some occasions, not as much as that first summer, but there's a smattering of automobile maulings. And they're always in the vicinity of the swamps around Bishopville, which is outside of Charleston, where Mr. Lizard Man made his presence.
I think that's
appetite for cars known.
Yeah. I think that's the warning, like, don't drive your good car around that area.
In 2015, something remarkable happened, Deena.
Oh.
There's been proof. A photograph
my God.
of the creature was taken by a woman with her cell phone as she left church.
Looking now.
There is a subsequent video that may prove Lizard Man's existence. Did you see
stop.
it? Did you see it?
Did you see it?
Yes, I sure did. It's incredible. It looks like a T-Rex costume.
It looks like a Godzilla
it looks like
costume.
it also looks like if a very jacked man just wanted to be a lizard dude.
Oh my God, there's even one with like a news, like it was on
the news.
The news, Lee County.
It gets better. The South Carolina Emergency Management Division tweeted out the warning about the possible lizard man's reappearance during the Great American Solar Eclipse of 2017.
Stop it.
During the solar eclipse, Lizard Man was ready to come out. And they weren't sure because of his nocturnal state. They were worried about the total solar eclipse, if that would make him think it was nighttime.
And he
would come out. Okay, but guess what, guys?
He didn't.
He didn't come out. So everyone's really upset about it.
I am dying.
Maybe he didn't know he was invited.
Well, Lizard Man's real, guys. We saw him, and he's on steroids.
I mean, this is the kind of lizard that I'm afraid of. But those are typically like kimono dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're usually in Australia. So I think you guys,
I can't wait for you to see the picture of this. It looks like he's been on roid raging for 300 centuries.
I cannot. It literally, to me, that's a Godzilla costume.
But just think about the fact that this is probably some dude.
Did he like buy a costume and just like spray paint it?
He had to, and like the poor cops in the late 80s are just making plaster casts of his feet in the woods, and it's just some dude very lonely in his mom's basement where he lives.
It's like the serial killer who dressed up like a clown.
Oh, yes. I did not like that because I actually lived in that area at the time, and that was terrifying.
I know a lot about that.
That's terrifying.
It really was, and it started catching on too.
Yeah,
but CNN guys has a link to this that says, "Is Lizard Man back?" CNN affiliate WIS reports on Lizard Man, a local urban legend that went viral on August 4th, 2015.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
He's
even
so
made
jacked.
CNN.
I can't wait for you guys to see this. But also, I love that they say his appetite isn't
automobiles.
for people. It's just automobiles.
Yeah.
He's like, ooh, that cherry red paint. Let me get some of that.
Yeah, right? Dessert.
I got to do the fun, silly one.
Those were the fun, silly ones. And I think that is the fun of urban legends, right?
God,
Some of them are just
absolutely
ridiculous that you're like, really?
Nothing about what I just said terrifies me.
No.
Like, I'm not even like the ounce scared. Although the story you're about to tell, which is hilarious because we can say it about everything, it is Charleston's biggest urban legend.
Yeah. There are so many urban legends, right? Especially in this area. And I guess a radio station decided to have a vote, and they voted that the tomb that would not stay closed was the number one urban legend. When I read that title, I was like, that sounds like an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it does.
I loved that show.
Yeah,
me too.
My mother did not love me watching.
Have you seen the remake of it?
Yeah, with Justin Long.
Yeah,
it's good.
It's a movie? Or
show.
It's a show. It's good.
It's like a limited series.
Yeah, your students probably love it.
Oh my God, amazing. Well, it's about Julia Laguerre. She was the wife of a wealthy planter in Edisto Island that just got sick one day, and they think it might have been diphtheria, which I don't know much about that, but it said she tragically died of this disease, 1852, right? So not only have we seen that they really don't take care of people in jail or really question anything judiciously, apparently, if they think you're dead, you're dead.
Yeah.
That's just what happens. Yeah. So the Laguerre family had a mausoleum, and, put her in there, sealed the door shut, and apparently never went back. That's the part that I have a hard time with because, if you think somebody, your wife, daughter, sister, passed away, you'd visit them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? No. a couple of years go by until Julia's young son passes away, and the groundskeeper reopened the door for his burial. Well, I don't think they were expecting to find her decomposed body next to the door. So and also let's add that there were scratch marks on the door interior, which basically tells you that she was entombed alive.
That's horrific.
That's the
horrible.
You know, like they say stories of people being buried alive. That's why they put the little bells, because during the Black Plague, they were never sure if someone was actually dead, and you could ring the little bell. But actually what happens when you die is your muscles kind of twitch and gases are released. So the cemetery was just like a bunch of bells ringing, and the people that work in cemeteries were like, is everybody alive?
Yeah.
Like, what is happening?
That's my worst nightmare.
Yes, same.
Yes.
That's terrifying.
That is beyond. Yeah. I would wet myself.
Well, just like our boys from the...
Yeah, I'm with them. I would release bodily fluids.
Same.
And that is where the story kind of takes that urban legend twist, because not only is that horrific, but allegedly they tried reburying her bones and adding her deceased child, right? And they tried resealing the mausoleum door. Well, now they're saying the door refused to remain closed.
Hell yeah, it doesn't.
I just picture her ghost like putting her foot in the door, like, nope, not again.
Yeah.
So because people were like frequenting the cemetery, they did eventually just decide to take the door off. So when you go to visit it now, there actually is no door on her mausoleum. But I get, I feel like we talked about it with something else that, I was like, don't close the door.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like maybe it's just like some sort of warning
There's
that kind of spirits are telling you, like, let them out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the dungeon with the tour guide, the door slammed closed.
Keep them out.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love that we're kind of ending on that, because full circle for Charleston, obviously something we learned, like very dark roots on how Charleston was settled, what they did to settle and create their town, as a port town and all of that kind of stuff. But because it's rooted in so much evil, you can't not expect it to be haunted.
Yeah.
And no matter what you believe, you can't deny, even if you're a skeptic for this kind of stuff, you can't deny what happened there is not haunting.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, truly horrific things. You've got the fire, you've got the flood, you've got all of the horrific plantations and slavery and slave trade. They use that port for massive amounts of slave trade.
Well, and that's the thing, like it being a coastal town, especially, you have so many people coming and going. So you have so many cultures and
war.
People from all over the place coming to this area, bringing with them all of their history and culture and everything there as well.
I kind of look at it as, because it was founded on so much horrible, whatever you want to call it. These are the people that are like, no, we're going to keep our story alive until the right people are ready to tell the real story.
Absolutely.
And I kind of love that, because Charleston is one of the most touristy areas in the country, right?
Haunted places.
That's number one. All right. But I think even if people aren't familiar with many different places in the United States, Charleston.
Yeah.
And there are some spooky, creepy things going on there.
This one was really fun because, we told the spooky aspects of it, but, feel free to do your own research. Again, we're going to throw up all those links, and we hope you enjoyed the stories, because they were, a lot of fun to tell this time. And this was one that we didn't know a lot about, even though you two had done tours. We all learned a lot in this one. Where Sleepy Hollow, we grew up with it, right? So this one was like definitely a learning curve for us, but it is one. I mean, I have to go now.
Yes.
Like, we have to go.
Yes. And we
together.
encourage that. Anyone listening who's got a little bit of a spark of interest, I would recommend it 100%.
And also send us your stories, because when we did Sleepy Hollow, we got people saying like, yeah, I've done the tour. I did the nighttime tour. If you were lucky enough to have Deena as your tour guide. But also for people in our inner circle who we all went to school, we all learned these stories. We're all told these stories. But this is one of those ones where I want to hear everyone else's stories, because the Sleepy Hollow stories I have been hearing from, family members and friends my whole life. But I want to hear other people's stories, because it just seems like this whole freaking place, as gorgeous and beautiful and historic as it is, and just like a mecca of beautiful food and shopping, what a freak show.
Yeah.
So I want to hear more about that.
There's got to be. Yeah, I feel like anyone that grew up there has stories.
Went to college there.
You know, like you grew up hearing these stories or other stories, or we'd love to hear them.
Yeah.
And we know there's so many that we didn't even have enough time to tell.
And again, I just do want to reiterate, we talked about it a little bit in one of our other episodes. We are going to be doing a bonus episode for you guys on the darker history of how Charleston was founded. So we're going to get somebody that's a little bit more educated on that topic to do that episode with us and educate us, because we don't know a lot, and we're excited to share that with you guys. And we also want suggestions on what we should do for next season. We have some holiday episodes planned for you. We know what we're doing for that, but we want suggestions. Like if you live in a town that has some creepy stuff going on, and people don't know about it, tell us and we will do it.
We want to know.
We want to know.
We like the unknown.
We do.
On that note,
folk around and find out, folks. Follow us on social media.
Yeah.
We are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We will see you guys next season.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Sinner, you better get ready. Sinner, you better get ready. Hallelujah. Sinner, you better get ready. The time is coming and the sinner must die. The time is coming and the sinner must die. The time is coming and the sinner must die.
Folktown is a production of Gotham West Studios. Our editor is Katie Yonner. Our associate producer is Grace Heerman. Our production coordinator is Nicole Vargas. Our senior content producer is Kyle Bosch. Our director of marketing is Dale Watts, and our executive producer is Tommy West. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Folktown Podcast.